In 1899, Butch Cassidy's wild bunch robbed a Union Pacific train and made off with an estimated $30,000, the equivalent of around $1 million today. But this wasn't a Hollywood shootout. This heist, and others like it, were masterpieces of criminal planning, executed with the precision of a military operation. The real story of the Wild West is far more complex and interesting than the myth of the quick draw. The West wasn't won or lost with a lucky shot. It was stolen with a solid plan. Today, we're pulling back the curtain of myth to reveal the surprisingly sophisticated methods behind these legendary crimes. We're not just talking about robbery. We're talking about strategy. We're talking about criminal masterminds who treated their heists like a profession. They were innovators and logisticians who understood the systems they were attacking better than the people paid to defend them. We're going to uncover how men like Butch Cassidy and his wild bunch planned and executed heists so audacious they became legends. But the real story, the one hidden in the details, is even more incredible than you might think. Butch Cassidy, one of the era's most successful outlaws, was known more as a cunning strategist who preferred to avoid violence than as a gunslinger. This defines the golden age of the great heists, from the 1870s to the turn of the century. The romantic image of the lone outlaw is mostly fiction. These crimes weren't defined by impulsive violence, but by carefully calculated operations. Gangs like the Wild Bunch or the Doolin Dalton gang operated less like a pack of wolves and more like a corporation. Their business was theft, and for a while, business was booming. Their success wasn't an accident. It came from a major shift in criminal thinking. Leaders like Cassidy realized that the greatest weapon in their arsenal wasn't a six-shooter, but a solid plan. This wasn't just about grabbing cash and running. It was about risk assessment, resource management, and exploiting every weakness on a rapidly expanding, yet fragile, American frontier. They studied train timetables, understood payroll schedules, and knew the land in a way no city-bred lawmen could ever hope to. They were, in a way, the first project managers of the criminal underworld. Every heist was a project with distinct phases: picking a target, gathering intelligence, assembling the team, executing flawlessly, and finally, the most important part, the escape. To understand how they became so legendary, we have to break down their process, piece by meticulous piece, and it all started with choosing the perfect target. In 1889, Butch Cassidy's first major bank robbery, in Telluride, Colorado, was a success not just because he stole $21,000, but because he chose a target so isolated he could simply vanish into the rugged wilderness of Robber's Roost afterward. Choosing where and when to strike was an art form. The decision was a complex calculation of risk versus reward, where the ideal target wasn't just rich, it was vulnerable. Outlaws would spend weeks, sometimes months, gathering information, looking for specific payroll shipments on trains or gold deliveries on stagecoaches. For instance, the Wilcox train robbery of 1899, one of the Wild Bunch's most famous jobs, targeted the Union Pacific Railroad's overland flyer. This wasn't a random choice. This train was known to carry huge sums of money. The gang knew exactly what they were after, using explosives to blast open the safes and making off with their massive haul. Timing was just as critical. A gang might wait for a local festival, knowing the sheriff and his deputies would be distracted. Or they might strike when a key lawman was out of town. The Dalton gang, before their final raid went so wrong, were masters of this. They chose days when they knew cash shipments had just arrived, maximizing their potential haul. This foresight, applied to both time and location, was the calculated first move on a giant chessboard. Figures like Laura Bullion, a member of the Wild Bunch, played a crucial and often overlooked role in the gang's success, acting as intelligence gatherers who could deflect suspicion far better than a group of rough-looking men. The best outlaws knew that information was more valuable than gold because it was the key to getting it. Before any heist, a gang would run extensive surveillance. They'd watch a bank to learn the daily routines of the staff, observe train schedules, and map out every street, alley, and escape route. Often, this intelligence came from people. Gangs cultivated a network of informants and sympathizers across the frontier. These could be disgruntled railroad employees, underpaid bank clerks, or just ordinary folks who felt more loyalty to the charismatic outlaws than to the faceless corporations. Many people at the time saw men like Butch Cassidy as Robin Hood figures, who only targeted the big cattle barons and greedy eastern banks that were squeezing the little guy. Whether true or not, this perception certainly helped them find allies. This intricate web of spies, allies, and observers was the central nervous system of any major heist. Butch Cassidy's wild bunch operated like a modern special ops unit. Cassidy was the strategist, the Sundance Kid was the muscle, and other members were specialists in demolitions or horsemanship. No single outlaw, no matter how brilliant, could pull off these schemes alone. The great gangs of the West were assembled like specialized teams, with each member chosen for a specific skill. This wasn't some loose collection of thugs, it was a highly organized unit where everyone had a job. This division of labor was critical. During a robbery, there was no room for confusion. Each member knew their role and performed it with practiced precision. The Dalton Gang, in their prime, also operated with this discipline. They understood psychology. They would yell commands with authority and move with a swift, rehearsed confidence designed to overwhelm their victims into compliance. Faced with this sudden, organized chaos, bank tellers and train conductors had no time to even think about resisting. This structure also served a purpose after the heist. The gang often had a prearranged plan to split up, riding in different directions to confuse a posse, only to regroup later at a designated hideout. After the Wilcox train robbery, the Wild Bunch did exactly this, with one group heading for the infamous hole-in-the-wall hideout, while another rode west, making pursuit nearly impossible. They were a well-oiled machine, and every part was essential. We're getting into the nitty-gritty of how these criminal masterminds pulled off the perfect crime, and there's still more to uncover. But first, if you're enjoying this look into the hidden corners of history, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. It really helps the channel out and ensures you won't miss our next investigation. During his first big robbery in Telluride, Butch Cassidy used a brilliant psychological trick. He ordered everyone not to raise the alarm for a full 10 minutes after his gang left, an eternity on the frontier. The goal of a professional heist wasn't a bloody gunfight, but speed and intimidation. The execution was a whirlwind of controlled chaos, where the threat of violence was far more effective than violence itself. They projected an aura of absolute control, leaving their victims too stunned to fight back. Take the Wild Bunch's robbery of the bank in Montpelier, Idaho in 1896. Cassidy and his men walked in and through sheer force of presence forced everyone against the wall. They collected all the money without firing a single shot. By the time the 10-minute grace period was up and the alarm was finally raised, the gang was miles away. This method was far better than a violent takeover. It minimized risk, slowed down the formation of a posse, and left fewer witnesses who could give a clear description in the middle of a panic. These weren't mindless attacks, they were carefully staged performances designed for maximum efficiency. The Outlaws controlled the narrative, from the moment they walked in to the moment they vanished over the horizon. The Wild Bunch's greatest advantage wasn't their guns, but their logistics, a chain of hideouts and pre-planned supply routes known as the Outlaw Trail, stretching from Montana down to Mexico. For a Wild West outlaw, the robbery was only half the battle. A successful heist meant nothing if you were caught an hour later. The getaway was, without a doubt, the most critical and carefully planned phase of the whole operation, where their deep knowledge of the terrain gave them their biggest advantage. Places like Robber's Roost in Utah or the Hole in the Wall in Wyoming were natural fortresses, almost impenetrable to lawmen. Before a heist, the gang would strategically place fresh horses along their escape route. A posse, riding horses that were already tired from the chase, could never keep up with outlaws who could switch to a fresh mount every 10 or 20 miles. This relay system was a simple but devastatingly effective advantage. They would also use the terrain itself, sometimes triggering rock slides to block canyon passes after they rode through. The state of law enforcement back then only made this advantage bigger. Many sheriffs were poorly equipped, and posses were often just hastily assembled groups of civilians. There's a famous, though likely exaggerated, story of one sheriff having to chase the Montpelier bank robbers on a bicycle because it was the only transport he had. Whether it's true or not, it illustrates the reality: the outlaws were professional fugitives, while the lawmen were often amateurs playing a desperate game of catch-up. In 1892, the Dalton gang tried to rob 2 banks at once in their own hometown of Coffeyville, Kansas, believing it would make them legends. Instead, they were recognized almost instantly, despite their fake beards, and the townspeople fought back, killing most of the gang in a bloody street battle. For all their brilliant planning, these outlaws weren't invincible. The line between a legendary heist and total disaster was razor thin, and sometimes the flaw was simple human arrogance. Sometimes failure came from the outside world. The frontier was changing. The reach of the law was growing, helped by new technologies like the telegraph and more organized groups like the Pinkerton National Detective Agency. The Pinkertons were relentless, professional manhunters. They used the telegraph to spread information faster than any horse could ride, circulated wanted posters with photos and descriptions, and planted informants to create distrust within gangs. And occasionally, a plan failed because of simple bad luck or incompetence. One outlaw, Dick Fellows, successfully robbed a stagecoach carrying a fortune, but then realized he'd forgotten any tools to open the strongbox. When he tried to heave the heavy box onto his horse, the horse bolted and ran off, leaving him with nothing. These failures are a crucial reminder that behind the legends were mortal men capable of greed, ego, and sometimes just plain foolish mistakes. Ultimately, the same technologies that the outlaws exploited, the railroads and the telegraph, were the very forces that led to their downfall. The great heists of the Wild West were a product of their time, a unique era of vast, lawless territory combined with the sudden arrival of huge wealth on trains and in banks. The outlaws who thrived in this environment were far from the simple thugs of legend. Men like Butch Cassidy were pioneers of planning, intelligence, and teamwork. They understood that a successful operation depended on knowing the target, controlling the environment, and planning for every possibility, especially the getaway. Their reign, however, couldn't last. Law enforcement got more organized and technologically advanced. The frontier began to shrink, and with it, the places where an outlaw could just disappear. The secrets they left behind aren't buried with their loot. They're written into the very history of their meticulously planned crimes. What do you think was the single most important element to their success? Their planning, their team, or their getaway strategies? Let us know in the comments below.